our Tech Chat series. We're going to feature some Israeli-based entrepreneurs who have funding from China. And the first one is Ron Teicher from EverCompliant. He's actually funded by Arbor Ventures, and we have Lior Simon here from Arbor Ventures. So why don't you come up, Ron and Lior. So these Tech Chat series are really a little bit of a case study of these emerging companies and how they're getting along, how they're growing, what their challenges are, what their opportunities are. So I'll let Lior take it away. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Rebecca. So I'm Lior from Arbor Ventures. I'll probably tell you a little about us later on in the VC panel. Ron Teicher here, the CEO of EverCompliant, one of our recent portfolios in Israel, doing AML for just anti-money laundering. Why don't we start by first tell us, Ron, what made you jump into the deep water and decide to become an entrepreneur? And how did you come upon the AML space?
Well, I really couldn't deal with. I needed to consume an endless amount of responsibility, and I just couldn't get enough working for other people. So I ventured and looked for opening my own company. EverCompliant is a cyber intelligence company where we utilize our technology to help detect and prevent what we call transaction laundering, which is really the digital evolution of money laundering. Everything that is happening in the real world around money laundering is happening in much higher pace on the digital space. And surprisingly, both the regulators and the industry are not fully aware of it. It's just a case of a typical technological evolution where you have great technology, you have payment companies that erupt and change the market, that bring what they call frictionless onboarding and get people to have access to transaction and acquiring and accepting money. But they forget to bring the risk management around it. And so we live in a world today that really allows for anybody, and we were talking about terrorism and drug cartels. The situation today is that anybody can launder money through e-commerce without getting caught. It's very, very easy. It's much harder to detect. The operational cost is dropping dramatically, and so there's a big incentive to take part in it, and that's where we sit in. We help banks, payment players, payment facilitators, marketplaces to identify merchants that sit within their portfolio that look legitimate, but in actuality funnel transaction for criminal sources. So that's what we do.
And Rebecca was mentioning earlier the tech triangle between Israel, US, and China. So where is EverCompliant situated within this love triangle?
So that's a very interesting case. I think it's a really a perfect use case because we actually started working in the US. We were adopted with some of the largest banks, and we were actually referred to one of the biggest players in China by the US bank. Basically, the Chinese company, were expanding westward, and we're looking to start doing business in the U.S., working with the U.S. banks. And because we were helping the bank to identify those potential fraudulent activities, they said, okay, if you want to work with us, you have to work with EverCompliant. And so we really got the red carpet into China and started to work with one of the big players. And we find ourselves in a situation, just as we sit in the middle, Israel is sitting in the middle between China and the U.S., we literally help to bridge communication between, and even culturally, help to bridge the gaps between, both sides' expectation. On one hand, the U.S. bank, rigorous risk regime. On the other hand, a Chinese trying to understand and play by the expected rules. And I think we play a very important role in sort of mitigating this gap.
So Amos was just asking, when will Israeli cyber finally enter the Chinese market? So I think this question is highly related to you. You do business both with the U.S. and China. So why don't you tell us a little about your experience and the differences between these two markets and your operations with them?
So, yeah, when we went first to China, we really didn't know what to expect. And one of the things that I noticed was very significantly, and this is just from my, small, humble experience, very significantly, they desire to understand. In many cases, in other places around the world, we will come in, we will talk about our solution and describe the end result. And in a lot of the cases, that was enough, but not in China. They really had to understand how this was done. And most of our first meetings were not with not the risk people, not the sales people, not the procurement people, but the engineers. And we were sitting there and explaining, and once they were convinced that we're actually providing a solution, then the business process became very, very easy. We didn't need to convince anybody anymore. So that was a very predominant difference that I've noticed.
And so you're on the front, and you meet with all of the stakeholders within this ecosystem. Where do you believe fraud is headed in the future, and what opportunities will come up with the changes ahead?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, as I said, again, we're talking about terror and we're talking about drug lords facilitation. It's a really frightening future, again, because the easiness of dirty money being laundered in e-commerce. I think some of the things that we're doing as Israelis with things that we bring from our experience, we can definitely play a key role in helping to mitigate some of those risks that exist there. We can already see cases of, there's one prominent case of terrorist financing that has been done through what we call transaction laundering online. The Charlie Hebdo case in Paris, where the terrorists came and gunned the entire editorial team over there. According to the French police report, the money the terrorists got was from selling fake Nike shoes online. So basically, there was some bank that opened a merchant account for these guys who sold fake Nike shoes online, and with the money, they went out and did the terror act. The recent El Chapo case in the U.S. with the drug cartels, the way people were pushing back people were pushing back the money back to Mexico was literally but just buying fake goods over fake websites in Mexico. So the drugs were pushed into the U.S. and the money was routed back through fake purchases of fake websites. So yeah, it's very, very challenging, and I think again, we've gained a lot of experience and can bring a lot to the table and play a very significant role in helping to identify this type of problems and mitigate them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.